national, federal way of giving money to research facilities and people. It's the National Science Foundation can decide, who's going to get how much money, but they cannot operate research facilities or create them or that kind of thing. So at this point in time, there was not like a national observatory. There's not really a place for astronomers to do their research. There were observatories, of course, but they were more like privately owned, and there was just a real need for like an observatory where a lot of the astronomers could go to, and it would have modern facilities for them. So they created this company for the purpose of creating a national observatory. And their mission statement is promote excellence in astronomy research by providing access to state-of-the-art facilities. So their goal was to build a place for astronomers to get their research done. So Kitt Peak was born. It was founded in 1958. It didn't take them that long, really, to get this going and started. 150 mountain ranges were surveyed in California, Arizona, and New Mexico. 150. And at the time, this is the 50s, so they're in planes and stuff and going around. And they didn't have like GPS really. They didn't have the way of knowing exactly that if a mountain range was on an Indian reservation. So they picked these favorite mountain ranges, and they found out that Kitt Peak was on the reservation. They knew that they would have to deal with, it wouldn't be as easy as just getting the land from the government. So the purpose of Kitt Peak is to provide the facilities for astronomical research, and the reason that it's a really good place is it has a dry climate, has low rainfall, and low cloud cover. It's not too expensive for astronomers to travel to. So like if you have an observatory like we do now in Chile, or in some other continent that costs a lot of money for astronomers to get there. It's at good elevation, but it's not too elevated. So it's the more elevation you get, the less atmosphere you're looking through. But if you get too elevated, then it's harder for people to adjust if they're going up and down a mountain. Or if they're, everyone's used to living at low elevation. When they go up too high, it can be hard to adjust. So it's close to Tucson, but not too close that the city below is awful. But it was really important that they be close to an urban center, because that's really helpful. For instance, Kitt Peak is where it is, and NOAO is located across the street from this building. So it's in an urban center, which is very helpful. And it was near the University of Arizona, so they had a university nearby, which is important because the university has research facilities too, and scientists and astronomers. Okay. So Kitt Peak is located on the reservation, so ARA could not simply ask the federal government if it was okay to use the land and just start building. They had to go through some hoops. Kitt Peak is known to the Tohono O'odham as Lologam, the mountain I mentioned earlier. It's one of their sacred mountains, so it's a very important place to them, and culturally and religiously. And initially, the tribal officials were skeptical. They did not think this was a good idea to just give up their mountaintop to these people who said they needed it. So Dr. Aidan Maynell and Dr. Edwin Carpenter, both astronomers, they invited tribal officials to Stewart Observatory here to view the telescope. It was a different telescope in the dome at the time, but right over there, to look through the telescope, to have like a little star party, I guess, to inspire, to show them that astronomy is cool and it's good stuff we're doing. So they looked through the telescopes, and at the end of the night, I guess they decided that they thought it would be a good idea to have Kitt Peak in for astronomy research to happen from the mountaintop. So Mark Manuel was the chairman of the tribal council at the time, and so he was the one who, his mind was changed, and he decided he supported Kitt Peak. So so they allowed the astronomers to have and use the land as long as it was used for astronomy research and scientific purposes. So we have a gift shop on Kid Peak, but we don't have a restaurant, or, you know, it's not like we could, not that we'd want to, but we couldn't build a shopping mall up there or something like that. Okay. So for many years, Kid Peak operated, and they started with like one telescope in 1958, and they added more and more, and by the 2000s, we had over 20 telescopes up there. And this is like, well, 50 years later, really. And in 2005, construction of an array of 7 new radio telescopes began. And this project was called the Veritas Project. It was 7 telescopes. They would have looked like this. They do kind of look like this because other ones exist elsewhere. And this image, this picture here is like a concept image, really, because this is like Kid Peak where the picture was taken, and then they put these telescopes there. So that's what it would look like if it had been built, but they didn't get to finish building it. So they started building it, and then the Tohono O'odham Nation realized, they didn't know what was happening at first, but they realized it was happening, and they were angry. They didn't want any more telescopes built on Kid Peak, and they filed a lawsuit, and they made all these claims and reasons why they shouldn't build any more telescopes. And anyway, construction stopped, and so the relationship between these two groups used to be fairly amicable, but over the years it degraded somehow. And then, you know, the people in charge of the reservation, the head people, the chairman, you know, that changes over time. They had a very different group of people in charge, and these people were not really happy with Kid Peak and someone else using their sacred mountaintop. And they didn't want any more telescopes. So we stopped building, we stopped construction, and in the future, it's unlikely that they're going to build any more telescopes because they can't have the relationship between the Tohono O'odham and NOAO degrade further. Kid Peak is not the only instance where this problem is found. It's kind of common, actually. And here's some examples. Mauna Kea is it's not exactly a mountain, it's a dormant volcano in Hawaii, which happens to be a great location for astronomy research. But it also happens to be a sacred religious temple of the native inhabitants of Hawaii. So they're very against the telescopes that are built up there, and and it's kind of a current thing. You know, you can get online, well, not so much Kid Peak, but Mauna Kea, you can find lots of stuff about the people in Hawaii who don't want the telescopes to be there protesting, and they have all these reasons why it's bad. Yeah, but there are telescopes up there now. It was not reservation land or anything, so there were no obstacles or not as many obstacles for the astronomers. Mount Graham is also in Arizona, and it's sacred ground for the Apache Indians. And it's also a sky island, which I guess all mountains are, really, especially mountains and deserts, because the environment on the mountain, well, the higher you go, so particularly on the top, is very different from the environment on the ground or in the desert. So whereas you have pine forests on the top of the mountains, you have desert on the bottom, and so that creates just a special situation where animals only exist on this one mountain. And so, of course, there's a species of squirrel that only lives on Mount Graham, and conservationists don't want people using the mountain, especially astronomers, because they're afraid that they'll, you know, just accidentally hurt the squirrel population. That's about all I have for my presentation. I need to see that. But, so,
So when they built started making the Veritas telescopes, did they consult with the tribal leaders, or did they just start, hey, it's our mountain?
Well, at the time, you know, they made a contract really when they were allowed to, when they convinced the Tohono O'odham people that they should build the observatory. They had this contract that said they could only use it. They could use it all they want as long as it was only for astronomy and scientific research. So they really didn't, you know, they didn't need to get permission every time they built a telescope. They just had to only build telescopes. So they were just gonna start building. They didn't really. There wasn't in the past any like, you know, we're gonna notify you every time we add a telescope.
So it was just this new set of tribal leaders that were opposed to it.
It probably had been a long time maybe since they built the last telescope. I don't know. And it was really a very, there were 7 of them. I mean, it wasn't like just putting a little dome somewhere. They were big radio telescopes. So I don't know, maybe a smaller telescope amongst all the other ones up top would have been less noticed or less cared about. But this was in like kind of a different part of the mountain too. It was a little lower. It wasn't going to be like in the middle of all the other ones. It was a little way, and there were 7 of them. So they noticed and they weren't happy. Yeah.
And for Mount Graham, do you know the story of how like there's I think 2 instances of squirrel? Or that's
well,
that weren't really that were marked against the astronomers.
They told the astronomers they were gonna let them use the mountaintop if they could count the squirrels or something, and then if more than 3 squirrels died, then that would be the end of the telescopes on top of the mountain. So in the process of counting the squirrels, 2 were killed.
One of them had a heart attack when they were being tagged, and the other was run over by the people trying to save.
By the people who were counting the squirrels, who were concerned about the telescope people. And as far as I know, the astronomers haven't killed any squirrels. So.
Have you been there to Mount Graham before?
Yeah.
Yeah, they have a little like
there's like
marked
ropes everywhere. Yeah, you can't go past the ropes, or you violate, because you have to have like a license thing to go, a squirrel permit to go on top of the mountain, and you can't go past the ropes.
And in the spring semester, we might go to either Mount Graham or Mount Hopkins, where a couple really big telescopes reside. So look forward to that next semester.